Action Network. Tonight, our guest is Joe Foster. Joe is the coordinator for the Precinct Initiative. And Joe, welcome, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Dave, first, thank you and your group for having me. It is appreciated. My background is somewhat diverse. I've worked for the Department of Defense in technology and supply acquisition. I've worked for the FBI in tech services. I've worked also for Merrill Lynch. I cleared the first government security with the Federal Reserve Bank of New York on behalf of its parent company, ML & Co. Little footnote in history. I've also been involved in advanced technology, the digital force, Task Force 21, which is our modern military with the technology that's been deployed in Iraq and Afghanistan and so on. I've also worked as a program manager for BAE Systems, bringing in advanced technologies. And over the years, I've been most interested in government, obviously, being both on the private sector as well as in the public sector. And I've also looked at areas that I believe need serious reform. My interest in what I'm doing right now with this district and precinct initiative is trying to extend the bounds of participation by the general public. Part of the issues that we're seeing is that over the years we have grown more and more away from our responsibilities and abilities to participate in our government. Consequently, I think a lot of the issues and concerns that we're seeing today manifest themselves in the fact that we are no longer in charge of our destiny. We are being dictated to, and it's largely our fault. The problem is that when a true grassroots movement comes up like the Tea Party, it highlighted the abilities and the opportunities that are available to the American citizens. Also, because of that, it becomes a threat to the established order. That threat is manifesting itself in many ways. There's a demonization that's taken place. And there's also this separation again of trying to separate this John Q. public, the citizen, from the ability to make a difference in their own lives. The district and precinct initiative that I'm looking, hopefully, is going to take root is down to the district and precinct level. We all know here in New Jersey is the great example. We have 567 plus or minus communities that comprise the state. We have 21 counties, of which you and I are from Monmouth County, which arguably is a pretty solid county. But it's like anything else where you have orders of magnitude when it comes to our elected officials. We have our main parties. We have Republican and Democrat. The Tea Party, again, representing a very basic, unfortunately, they're being presented as something entirely different, but basically all it is we're looking at how we're being taxed, we're looking at how we're spending our money, our taxpayers' money, and we're also looking at, do we still have respect for our Constitution and the institutions that are supposed to serve us, we the people. That is a threat to the established order. Over the years, we have seen a number of things take place that have garnered more of the power to Washington and less of the power to the individual, especially in our hometowns. Looking at the structures that are in place with the Republican and Democrat parties specifically, that each of the voting districts in each town becomes a microcosm of participatory democracy. Each district has a male and female representative.
You're talking about within the initiative. That's what the plan is.
Yeah, the initiative is to replicate the small d democracy that our nation was founded on.
Get back to our grassroots.
Back to the roots.
Okay.
And in Oceanport, for instance, we have 5 districts. That means we have 10 each. The Democrat Party, as well as the Republican Party, has 10 representatives that represent the town within the county. So when you're going to take issues forward, you're looking for candidates and voting for who's going to be your county chair and the positions of power, That is the basis.
So, excuse me, are you looking for people who will get into county committee seats, or are you looking for people who will come up with good government and just kind of observe and bring the issues to these folks?
That's an excellent question. The goal here, there are a number of ways that it can be approached. One way is obviously working within one of the parties, Democrat
Right.
or Republican Party. That obviously is a way of going. But what we're talking about is building constituent services based upon our friends, family, and neighbors.
Right.
Okay?
So
So
politics is local type of,
all politics are
Right.
local.
Okay.
And if you want to go back and other truisms, think globally, act locally.
Right.
It can't be more truer. In this case here, that if our friends and neighbors, unfortunately in our country, we basically don't know who our friends and our neighbors are anyway. We know who
Right.
our friends are. But in order to reestablish that type of sense of community, I'm going to call them communities of interest. We have to create communities of interest.
Right.
So if there's five neighbors in my district that have children in grammar school, they have school-related issues
Right.
that they're concerned about, whether it's drugs or curricular or whatever. Those people form that community of interest. If they're talking with one another, if they're taking time to learn what the issues are, if they're taking time to figure out how they can address those without sitting there as one person going to a school board meeting and then being demonized if they get out of, if they're out of control or deemed out of control by the establishment, it becomes an issue and they don't
Right.
get anything done. Where there's unity, there's strength.
Sure.
And so consequently, what I'm hoping to see happen from this is that in each of the towns, each person that may be viewing this will have enough interest in saying, gee, I have a concern. My garbage isn't getting picked up on a good schedule.
Right.
What can be done about that? Well, maybe they'll talk to one of their neighbors. They'll walk next door. They'll walk around the block. And if they look and if they know what district they're in, all those people in that district represent a voting block. Okay, so your council people, your mayors, the public works people, your elected officials, your civil service, they all now have to respond to you because you're no longer a voice
more
of the block.
individual. Now you have a group of numbers. It's all
Exactly.
power in numbers.
The other thing is you want to avoid at all costs the sense of a top-down command and control.
Right.
What we saw happen back in 2009 with the Tea Party, it was an incredible movement.
Right.
The power, the simplicity of it was beautiful. First thing that happened, since most of the Tea Party issues kind of mirror your traditional Republican, small government, low taxes, things like
Right.
that, it became a bone of contention who was going to control it. And there was a lot of gamesmanship, there was a lot of trickery going on. They were co-opting, there was co-option. A lot of the dirty tricks that you would expect from established politics obviously took place. It's still going on even today.
Sure.
We see a dedicated assault on Tea Party candidates. So how do you use that power? How do you bring it back and get it to
Okay.
work?
So is this an idea like getting people immersed slowly by getting them involved locally and learn how to bring their issues forth to their officials, and then you can grow and build on that? Am I understanding that correctly?
Exactly. Here, I think the secret is that you have to be careful with labels.
Right.
When a brand has been tarnished for whatever reason, and there's a dedicated assault on that brand, you have to kind of use the same sneaky approach that the progressives have been using for 50 and 60 years.
Right.
You use the Orwellian newspeak. You change the terminology.
Right.
You
Redefine
change-
words.
You redefine. It's the same thing. You're trying
Right.
to accomplish the same thing. You're just doing it in a more non-destructive manner.
Right.
So in this case here, because you're not taking on a label, you have to be careful with labels.
Right.
If you want to get people in the local towns that already have preconceived notions based upon 30-second sound bites that they get from the mainstream media,
Sure.
you have to sit there and say, how can we get beyond this? This may be a way of doing it because you're taking all issues, making them local, and then letting people decide what is in their best interest locally.
Right.
From there, as the educational process takes root, as they read more, as they study more, they start understanding that there's a broader picture that they can also participate
Simply
in.
planting seeds and letting them grow.
Johnny
and-
Appleseed. I
Exactly.
like to think myself as being Johnny
Appleseed.
Right.
Okay. So then, are there any particular issues you find locally that are kind of very common that you think people could really latch on to, that would be winners, so to speak, to help build their viability, their credibility? Are there any that come to mind?
Yeah, there are a number of things that I think, and it all depends. What I'm hoping that's going to happen here with our conversation
Right.
is that somebody's going to be sitting out in the audience, or they're going to be viewing it wherever they're going to be viewing this, and they're going to say, yeah, I have an issue in my town. I have an issue on my street. They may want to reach out and find what tools they could use.
Okay.
What might help them create that community of interest.
Right.
Once they start doing that, and there's a number of ways that it can be done, a lot of towns have very responsive, representatives.
Right.
A lot of the district committee people or the municipal chairs may be very, very good and very
Right.
responsive. What they have to do is find out who those people
Are.
are. If they don't exist, then they create their own.
Right.
Whether it's within the framework of a party, be it Republican or Democrat, I really don't care at this point.
Right.
The goal is better government. And what it's going to take to get there, sometimes you have to strip away the things that make us different.
Right.
And find the things that, work for all of
Right.
us.
Well, I find a lot of times, too, when you mention the two different parties, at a local level, like we're both from a small town, there don't really seem much difference between the political labels within that town. They only become when people start to name call them. But the issues, I find when you talk to people about the issues and strip away the label, most of them are pretty much in agreement. And once you get away from that, you can get people to talk and agree on things to make things move, which is obviously very important for the movement. Now, how do you envision this coming about? People contacting you, or what would be the protocol?
The optimum situation is that people take the idea, they mold it to fit their own needs,
Okay.
and they take it and run with it. The goal here also, though, would be to find other people, other communities of interest that share the same issues and concerns.
Okay.
So there's 53 towns in Monmouth County.
Okay.
Oceanport, again, being one of the
Right.
smaller towns. But if you look at 53 towns and you start the same thing in each one of those towns, word gets around.
Sure.
And people will come back to a central point to share the ideas and maybe even show up if it's a county-related issue, if it's the county tax rate is an issue.
Right.
And the spending or whatever. They can go to the freeholder meetings and they
Right.
can sit there and make their voices known. Now,
Right.
the beauty of it is, an elected official is an animal that needs daily care and grooming and feeding.
Yes.
And they understand this, and if they want to stay in that position, they will become much more
Right.
resilient, because they also understand that this is a power base that if they do the right thing, people will support them.
Right.
And word of mouth and going out door to door and all those good things
Right.
that make for successful politics
Right.
are something that
So
they
the key, too,
understand.
then, would be for the local folks to become well-versed in the particular issues.
Whatever
Because I
those
know when you
issues
go to a lot of times local meetings, or hear people get up, and it's like, my gosh, they don't even understand the topic, they're talking about it.
Exactly.
And they just get up, and that's why I think a lot of small groups lose credibility.
Yeah.
But if they're well-spoken and well-educated on the topic, that makes everybody kind of sit up and take notice and be a little bit more alert.
Exactly.
So I assume a big part of what you're talking about is to make sure these folks get educated on those important issues.
Yes.
So they're not just going there to complain, but they're going there to really talk about, okay, what are the solutions, or how do we approach this situation or problem?
Exactly. And again, politics in this country have become almost a dirty word.
Right,
It has a negative connotation as opposed to a positive one.
right,
The goal here, I think, in order to solve the problems, if you're solving problems collaboratively, that means you as a citizen living on a street, picking up some garbage if it's on the street or something,
Right.
and then expecting the appropriate services that you're paying for in the form of taxes. When those things start happening on a regular basis, good things happen, people start smiling at one another.
Right.
You can go to council meetings, you don't have to complain. you can go there and tell them what a great job they're doing.
Right.
Because the press is also at these things.
Right.
And when people start seeing things like that, it changes the paradigm a little bit, I
Right.
think.
And people are not used to that. Usually you hear people
Exactly.
calling up to complain. So
Exactly.
when they get a compliment or, I know a sincere compliment, because we've all seen in the paper a letter to the editor where you could tell it was just written by somebody, it's a setup.
Right.
Whereas other times you get ones where you could tell, gee, this person really is complimenting them and they're not politically aligned with either side. They're just talking about an issue that
Yep,
that people really looked at and responded to.
exactly.
And I guess a lot of what you're talking about too is, so if we start small and start solving those problems, then people get in the mode of solving bigger problems.
Right, and it's like any habit. You do something for 30 days.
Right.
It becomes a habit. If it's a good habit, you're glad.
Right.
If it's a bad habit, it's very hard to get rid of it.
Right.
But you have to do it and keep doing it and keep reinforcing the positive with more positive.
Right. So do you envision people having formal meetings or just little informal clutches within their neighborhood, or just, getting on the front stoop and talking to their fellow local neighbors? Or do you have a vision for this in that regard?
Actually, the vision that I have is pure chaos.
Okay.
Only because there's 8.5, 9 million people in New Jersey.
Right.
I can't speak to each person's condition.
Right.
But I can speak to, if you have a condition, what can you do to make it better? You can go to your elected officials by yourself, complain, give money to their campaigns, whatever the normal mode of operation is. That may or may not work for you.
Right.
But I think the important thing here is we have to reestablish the sense of community.
Right.
And I'm not saying in the communist sense, but I'm talking in the sense that neighbor to neighbor, that we respect one another, we work with one another, for a common goal.
Right.
And we also support one another when the need is there. If my house is on fire, I'm hoping my neighbor is going to at least pick up the
Pitch
phone
in,
and call
right.
the fire department
Right.
for me, so.
Okay, that sounds good. To learn more, what should people?
I'll be more
Is
than
there-
happy to share my website.
Okay.
And a phone number. I do have, I put together various templates.
Right.
So if somebody wants to do some outreach in their town.
Okay.
I think the goal here is to find, if you find one person that is motivated to be something like a municipal chair.
Okay.
Okay, they have to have the fire in the belly, maybe.
Right.
They have to have the need, and maybe the support of people around them, friends and family.
Right.
Somebody like that can go a long ways in order to expand this within their
Sure.
community.
I think the key you said was fire in the belly.
Yeah,
You need somebody who's really passionate about it,
Yeah.
because then their infectious enthusiasm will infect others in a good way.
Yes.
And get people involved and have leadership skills. You mentioned templates. Annie, give me a couple examples of what would be in those templates.
okay, if I wanted to do this myself,
Right.
I would go down to the local 7-Eleven stores, I'd put up those little flyers
Okay.
and say, here's my phone number and my email. Contact me if you have any issues or concerns about what is happening in
Whatever the
in my
issue is.
town, this
Right.
town, whatever the town it is. Once I have people contacting me, now I'm starting to gather some data as to, okay, what district do you live in?
Right.
Because what you want to do, you want to bring this down so that each district will have its own constituent service
Right.
focused person. Okay, that person is like the district mayor.
Right.
Not just a person that's Republican and he's sitting there, the
Right.
mayor says, I want you to be the committee person, you sit here, you vote
Right.
the way we tell you.
Right.
But I want somebody that really is going to look at his neighbors as being the people that put him there,
Right.
or her.
So he's truly representing the people.
His whole focus is to represent the people, his neighbors.
Right.
Okay, so if there's a problem with the trash pickup, chances are that one person that's having that problem isn't the only one.
Right.
So now you can raise it as an issue and you can get somebody to do something
Right.
about it. Business administrators are very,
Right.
they're very sensitive
Right.
to things.
Now, when you've been, I'm sure you've tossed this around with other folks and all, are there any specific issues that really seem, within New Jersey, that seem to hit a hot button?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Such as?
We had talked about this before. Everybody is concerned about their budgets
Okay.
and their taxes are
Right.
going up. Property
Right.
taxes, regardless of all the promises that our folks down in Trenton have
Right.
made, my taxes have gone up, your taxes have gone up, and
Sure.
they're going to continue. We also are starting to see the cost of services because of the inflation that doesn't exist. But we know if you buy a pound of meat, you're paying about twice as much for it as you were 3 or 4 years ago.
Right.
So the inflation's there. So all these things impact the families. Your gas has gone up by $1.50 a gallon or whatever.
Right.
So this is fertile ground for
Pretty
things
much
that,
bread and butter, pocketbook type issues or
Exactly.
what, which again, and that it pretty well does affect everyone.
But now where I think it gets interesting is as people become more and more engaged in worrying about these issues and addressing these issues, they become more self-aware about the other issues as well. I know for a fact, talking about things like Agenda 21, of which I was unwittingly a part of at the very beginning, people's eyes glaze over. It's unfortunate because they don't realize how much of our freedom is being given up on a daily basis by people that don't understand what they're giving up, and that's our elected officials.
Right.
So as they become more adept at learning about what's happening in their schools with Common Core and things like that, they will become more proactive, and they'll end up doing more along the lines of what I think the Tea Party was trying to accomplish at the national level.
Right.
But it has to be from bottom up. It can't be from top down.
Right. Most great movements or issues have to come from the grassroots because, and that, again, centralized planning never works because nobody, I don't care how brilliant, how smart they are, they can't understand what's going on in, as you mentioned, New Jersey, 567 districts. Each one has its own unique situation or characteristics. So if I'm the leader in Trenton, I blindly are telling people this is what you have to do, but I don't know the individual circumstances. I don't know the situation, and who knows better than the local folks. That's one thing I've always wondered about school boards when people talk about, well, we need a Department of Education in New Jersey. I keep thinking, well, why? I said, who cares more about the child's education? The parents, the local teachers, the local principal, and the local school board, or some bureaucrat sitting either in Trenton or Washington? And a lot of people look at you and think, well, gee, yeah, that's true. I'm thinking, I thought this would be pretty well common knowledge, that nobody's going to care as much as you will about the children in locals' education, even if you don't have children still in school there. You still have an interest in making sure these kids are well educated, and so absolutely, the fire has to come from down below.
Yeah. Just to expand a little bit on what you just said, the whole issue about schools, if we go back 40 years or 45 years, the entire basis of public education changed. We took the Hegelian dialectic as our model, our national model. And all that did was change to the same strategy that was being used by Nazi Germany and Stalinist Russia. It's indoctrination as opposed to reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Right.
Consequently, what we've been getting, the progressive movement, has been very successful only because, and I'm going to say only because, the school system has been so co-opted that we're not taught critical thinking anymore, but we're taught things like Arbor Day. Every kid knows Arbor Day. It's indoctrination. So, and it's important because most parents don't even understand this.
Right,
How do you educate them to that fact?
Right, well, I know most people have no idea what's in a lot of their kids' textbooks. I remember when my kids were little, I have to admit, I wasn't overly but every once in a while, one of my kids would show me something in a book, and of course, I would go and have a little discussion with the teacher or something, asking, how is this being taught? Things that they were saying are fact. We weren't fact, they were theories, which is fine. I have no objection if you mention them, but stop saying they're a fact. That is not a fact. There's a difference between a theory and a fact. And unfortunately, most people will blindly accept it. So you're right, they've been indoctrinated into it. So if you, as you say, if we get them involved at the grassroots level and start questioning.
Right, and not taking the answer from our public
Right.
officials as gospel.
Right. I go back to being a child of the 60s when they used to say question authority. I always question authority no matter what side of the political spectrum they were on. And I found out a lot of people who were big on question authority didn't like it when I was questioning them. Because when they're in authority, they didn't want to be questioned.
Exactly.
And they've allowed people to fall into that. And I think what you're talking about is getting people out of that, taking the blinders off, and getting in there and starting to ask some hard questions instead of just softballing it all the time.
But I think the secret, though, is you can't browbeat people. You can't force them
Right.
to learn something they don't want to learn.
Right.
They will only learn when they're ready to accept
Right.
those things that are valid.
And make it interesting.
Yeah.
I know, you're talking about schools is a little off topic, but I'm always fascinated how boring we make school. And there's no reason for it.
Yeah.
I saw a show, I think it might have been on 2020 or one of those, but they actually had two physics teachers from somewhere in like Gloucester County, New Jersey. And they were showing how kids who had no interest in physics are dying to get in their class. And they showed how they taught physics. I am very non-talented, to put it mildly, in science. I was watching, I wish I would have taken science if I was in high school and I was in their class. I would have been interested. They made it fascinating and showed how it interacted with the real world.
Yeah. Yep.
Same thing I noticed in school with economics. I love economics. In college, it bored me to death because all I had was a bunch of teachers who drawn X's, O's, inverse curves. That doesn't mean anything. But when you understand economics in a practical way, it's absolutely fascinating.
Right.
The study of human nature and behavior.
Yep. Absolutely.
And any other thing you'd like to add about how this project is to work?
Excuse me.
Sure.
My phone is just going
Okay,
off.
somebody's calling him about it.
My wife. I apologize. Okay.
Live TV, yes.
I'm sorry, Dave. Ask that
Okay.
question again, please.
Basically, how would we, again, how people get involved and more about how you envision it happening. So you really don't see it as you as being the focal point going. You're just giving them the tools to set it up. And then the objective will be for them to take the ball and run with it, but run it within their own little district.
Right. All I can say is that I'm hoping that there are, even if it's only one person out there,
Right.
every journey starts with the first step. If one person gets the points that I'm trying to make about their own lives, their own, their families and what's happening in their own neighborhoods, that will be a success. And in order to help foster that, there are things that they can do. I mean, they have to understand themselves first, to thine own self be true.
Right.
If they are very gregarious and outgoing and they love, if they've been in the arena and they've gone door to door, then by all means, they should use every trick that they know.
Right.
And I can give them some of the tools that may help them gather the people together with them that are of like mind.
Right.
Okay? And that's the key. If you can get 10 people in a town, you've got a core capability that can do a lot of things. You can start influencing what people are going to be
Right.
running for what offices. Now we can start getting people that understand it. The goal here is not to have establishment types that are just going to do what the party tells them to do.
Right.
But we need people that are problem solvers, understand the problems, think out of the box, and will respond to the constituents.
Right, right. Okay, Joe, I want to thank you for being on. And again, if anybody would like to contact you to learn more, give us your contact information.
I could be reached, my email is joseph.foster@millenniumoss.com.
Okay.
You can call me on my cell phone. I'm going to give it out, 908-433-2243.
Okay, say that again?
908-433-2243. And I'm also going to have a website up. My website will have some of the tools. I'll make it available. If people call me if they want some of these tools,
Great.
I'll fill it out for them.
Joe, once again, I'd like to thank you for being on, and
Thank you for having me.
thank you for watching, and have a great evening.